Have you ever imagined having a personal assistant like Jarvis, Mr. Stark's artificial intelligence PA? You can ask him to turn off the television, turn on the lights, and even open the doors for you every time the doorbell rings. Well, the Internet of Things is more than just a network of physical things. It can also scan and communicate between devices. According to Gartner research firm, connected smart devices will reach around 20 billion in 2020. How has the Internet of Things developed around the world today? And where does Indonesia stand? Joining me today is the Silicon Valley Technology Executive, who is also a chairman of the board of the Indonesia Diaspora Foundation. Ms. Sonita Lontoh, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jeremy?
Doing great.
Thanks for having me here.
Oh, it's great having you here. I'm great, actually. So you have an extensive history in Internet of Things. Can you explain to us a little bit more about the Internet of Things and how has it developed in the past, let's say, 3 years?
Oh, sure. Great question. And I guess I just want to go back to the basics, make sure everyone understands what Internet of Things is. So in a very basic form, Internet of Things is really about connecting devices, like I always think of the analogy, just like the internet connecting computers and enabling new applications like, email for our communication, social media like Facebook and Twitter, and even new business models, right? Like e-commerce with Amazon and option like eBay. So Internet of Things is really just like the internet and connecting many devices, not just computers, and enabling new applications, such as new ways of like how devices can understand our behavior and make lives easier for us. And in general, just making things more efficient and enabling better customer experience for us and also creating new business models.
From Gartner research firm, like they say that it's by 2020, it's supposed to reach around 20 billion devices.
Actually, very foreseeable because when you really think about it, there are about 7 billion people around the world, and there are many, many more devices. So the 20 billion by 2020 by Gartner, I think many other research firms have also said that it can reach 50 billion by 2030.
50 billion.
Yes, 50 billion because there are more devices than people.
Right. Yes. And this is taking into account that we're not just talking about our phones and our computers. We're going to be talking about, let's say, our coffee makers.
Yes, exactly.
Our cars.
Or refrigerators, or like many devices that can be smart, and have the sensor, can talk to the centralized system, but also can talk to each other.
So it can also tell me whether I'm living healthy or not.
Yes,
Like it can tell me that, oh, you're eating way too many meat and not enough greens.
Yes.
Okay.
But everything has to be programmable based on what you want, so the human would still have the control with regard to what does the human want the devices to do.
Right. And then how has it developed in the past 3 years around the world?
Yeah, good question. So I would say it really varies, when you really look at it globally. In the developed countries like North America, Western Europe, and Japan, I would say the development probably around 40-50%, in developing countries, such as Indonesia or some of our other Southeast Asian neighbors and even China, the development is still very nascent, probably less than 10%. But I would say the good news is that in many of these developing countries, there is no legacy system, meaning like, there's really nothing that has been developed. So you can actually leapfrog, you don't have to go through the traditional, infrastructure that many developed countries still have to deal with, but you can just leapfrog and like go right into Internet of Things.
So we can piggyback on their development, on their research. Once they reach that point, it's like, okay, well, we don't have to go through the research they're doing.
Exactly.
We'll just jump right where they are.
Yep.
Okay. What are some of the things in the past, like in your extensive history in Internet of Things, what are some of the things that we can learn from it in terms of developing it in research?
Yeah, I would say the way I would think of it is really in 3 big buckets, So from the technology perspective, I think, all the different providers have to work together so that the devices can seamlessly and securely interoperate with one another, right? Because when you really think about it, in order for your device to be able to talk to my device or to other devices, they have to like speak the same language, so-called the same language. So that standard development is very important. So that's from a technology perspective. And then the second one, I would say from a consumer education perspective, so a lot of the providers, I think, look at this more from a infrastructure deployment perspective, but they don't really take into account that it's very important to explain to end consumers, like you and me, that this is going on, and more importantly, to be able to articulate the benefits of this connectivity for the end consumers. So that's the second bucket. And then I would say the third bucket is really about human capital development, because as you can imagine, if we have all these interconnected devices, a lot of data, I would say our human capital, wherever it is, it could be like in the US, could be in Indonesia, but the human has to be have the skills in order to really take advantage, of this Internet of Things, because I believe in a lot of universities or schools, the curriculum that we have today are really not up to par to prepare our graduates to be ready for this 21st century.
Right. So you're saying that a lot of our let's say people in education right now, they are not being taught on how to best take advantage out of Internet of Things?
Yeah, or just how to best take advantage of data. Because when you really think about Internet of Things, at the end of the day, right, when you have all these connected devices, billions of devices, there will be billions of gigabytes of data created. So the new kind of workforce generation has to be able to really thrive in this digital world, know how to look at data and not just look at it, but actually get insights, analyze and get insights out of the data so that you can really take advantage.
Okay, so we talked about, where if people want to learn about IoT and how to take best advantage out of this, but how would Indonesian startups, like people starting businesses and whatnot, how can they best apply the concept of Internet of Things?
Yeah, I think they can learn from many ways, and actually a few friends and I started a nonprofit called Silicon Valley Asia Technology Alliance. Okay. So we take actually Indonesian startups, about 8 to 12 every year, 3 to 4 times a year, to come to Silicon Valley and really provide them with this immersive, experiential learning experience where they can directly connect with the different players, the different ecosystems of partners in Internet of Things at Silicon Valley, so they can directly learn about how to build this kind of company, how to scale it, what are kind of some of the skill sets that are necessary directly from the source, and of course, our hope is when they come back here, not only do they apply, the experience that they've learned from Silicon Valley here, but they also help, to expand that opportunities for other startups or other entrepreneurs here in Indonesia.
Right. So you basically provide them with the tools and the equipment to basically go out. Well, you said around 8 to 12 startups. What are the qualifications of being?
The qualifications, yeah. I mean, it has evolved over the years, and I think we found that our sweet spot is really a company that has at least got some funding, so it could not be really early stage. It has to already have some funding, maybe seed or Series A, and then ready to kind of scale, to scale up. So I would say, that is the main criteria.
Okay, so they have to be sort of prepared. They have they basically have their springboard ready to jump into.
For scaling, for growth.
So the Internet of Things sounds amazing. It really does sound amazing, but I can't help but to think that there are some concerns about it. There are concerns that these data, they're being collected by these devices, can be used for malicious intents. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course, and actually the industry has thought about that a lot, and of course we learn from the internet itself, because even today, there is data privacy issues that people are still working on from the internet perspective. So in terms of Internet of Things, if I go back to my first bucket of technology providers, what is going on right now, in addition to developing the standards so that the devices can talk to each other, technology providers, but also governments and policymakers are also working together to build a framework, internationally on how best we can really tackle the issue of data privacy and security to make sure that, people's data and people sensitive, personal information are not being used by hackers for, negative purposes.
Sonita Lontoh, thank you so much for joining us today and shedding us a little bit of light on Internet of Things.
Great, thank you, pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
thank you and good luck.
Thanks so much.
The Internet of Things is an upcoming thing, and I would urge everyone to kind of look into this and learn more about it before it's too late. And that's all we have for you today on this episode. Thank you so much for joining us and learning a little bit more about the Internet of Things. Don't forget to join us for our next episode where we will talk more about interesting topics and more guests.